These creatures are known as the bringers of good luck and prosperity, and thought by the ancient Greeks and Romans to be the messengers to the gods. I'm your host, Leah.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Steve. Today's episode is all about the small but mighty bee.
If you have an appetite for the strange and bizarre, then pull up a chair and grab a spoon for another intriguing serving of Remnant Stew. Remnant Stew is gluten-free, organic, made from all natural, free-range ingredients, and guaranteed to provide the recommended daily serving of curiosity.
Well, recently my wife and I were walking through a small public park here in the greater Cut and Shoot area when we happened upon a small placard in a flower garden. The notice read, quote, "If the bee disappeared off the surface of the globe, then man would only have 4 years of life left. Albert Einstein." I thought, wow, what a great quote, we said.
Wow.
Yeah, and I knew it would fit perfectly into this episode on bees that we were planning. However, upon further research, it turns out that Einstein didn't actually say that.
But it's on a plaque.
It's on a plaque, yeah.
It was a different Einstein.
Well, maybe not. Rather, it was invented as an Einsteinism in 1994 by a group of protesting beekeepers in France.
Saying that if he did say it, that's what he was going to say?
He probably meant to get around to saying that, although, personally, I like I just enjoy the phrase protesting beekeepers in France. It's a nice.
But it doesn't change the fact that it is true.
Right. They meant well.
Yeah, they meant well. And it is true that if we lost the bees,
right,
we would be doomed.
We'd be in trouble. We sure would be. They were attempting to underscore the important role that bees play in our lives. Now, before we move on any further, we want to point out that this episode is dedicated to our loyal listener, Gladys Kirk.
That's right.
Woohoo!
And she's the one who actually suggested that we do an episode on bees. And so thank you, Gladys. That was not something we'd thought of, but I really enjoyed doing the research on it. And I think this is going to be a fun episode, which also brings up the point that if you have an idea that you'd like for us to research and present, please send us an email and let us know.
Yeah, stay curious at remnantstew.com.
Right. Well, why are bees important? According to a website called study.com, pollen must be carried from the male parts of the plants to the female parts located inside the plant's bloom or flower. Now, this can happen just by the wind blowing, that can assist in this process, but the main pollinators of plants are insects, and specifically bees. Bees are especially helpful in plant pollination. If you examine a bee up close, you will detect that they contain actual little pollen baskets or pockets on their back legs. These enclosures are constructed from hairs, which snag pollen when the bee visits a flower. And as they move from flower to flower, the trapped pollen is released into the female parts of the new plant, which allows for reproduction. The reason bees like to hang around flowers at all is that their pollen and the nectar are their entire food source. That's what bees entirely eat, pollen and nectar. So why is this important? Well, plants form the basis of all ecosystems. Everything depends either primarily or secondarily on the plants. Without plants, there would be no food for the herbivores. And without herbivores, there would be no food for the carnivores. So, thus, plants provide 100% of the energy for the ecosystems of the world. Without the bees to help pollinate the plants, the food chain would collapse. Humans are also very dependent on bees. The crops that our food supply comes from are pollinated by bees as well. Artificial pollination has been attempted by agricultural researchers, but it's nowhere near as efficient as bee pollination. I can see a lot of researchers in lab coats out in the field and take a little pollen running around.
Shaking a plant over another one.
Right. It's just kind of slow and haphazard. Of course, bees are also producers of other products that humans use, especially honey and beeswax. I love honey, don't you?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But their practical value as pollinators is far greater than the value of the honey and wax production. So go bees.
That's right. Yay.
Now, there's an organization called Heifer International, Heifer.
I like that.
Is it heifer?
No, heifer. Heifer like a cow.
Heifer like a, Actually, I thought it was heifer because their symbol is a cow. Yeah.
Wait, isn't this episode about bees?
Yeah, well, okay, but...
Okay, but stay with us.
Yeah.
Heifer International is an organization that works in developing nations around the world, assisting farmers to help them improve the quality and quantity of their crops and to increase connections with markets and increase sales and incomes. As honeybees are essential to healthy crops, this organization incorporates bees and beekeeping into their farm projects. In other words, they go into a new area, help farmers with better farming methods, and they also say, why don't you grow some bees also, and that'll help things out. According to their website, heifer.org, quote,
Stop.
I have a new way to answer the phone when it's a scammer. Heifer International.
Wait.
Okay, sorry.
farmers who...
Did you get your extended warranty?
Right.
On your heifer?
Right. Farmers who keep bees see increased crop yields, whether they are growing coffee, spices, or vegetables. No matter what they're growing, their crop yields increase if they're keeping bees. Plus, they're able to harvest honey during the non-growing seasons to earn some extra income, producing as much as 60 pounds or more of honey each year.
Wow.
So the bees have a great role in helping farmers in developing nations.
Keep that rotation going.
That's
Thank
right.
you, Heifer International.
If you're looking for a sponsor.
That's right. I knew you were going to. I was
That's
trying
right.
to cut you off and get in
Remnant
there.
Stew,
Deja
brought to you
vu,
by
eh?
Heifer International.
Well, bees are incredibly important for us now. Well, and they obviously have been very important in the past because
Right.
there's a lot of folklore about it. And so according to a website called hobbyfarms.com, quote, the ancient Greeks and Romans believed that bees were servants and messengers of the gods and goddesses.
Oh,
The Romans believed that a swarm of bees was to be avoided, which
Duh.
well,
yeah,
they
most
were-
people.
they were dumb.
I know,
If
but
they're swarming, you're toast.
Yeah.
but while the swarm was on the move, so they were carrying messages and doing the biddings of the gods.
Oh, yeah, you don't want to get in their way.
Yeah, that's
Important
right.
message being delivered.
And in ancient Egypt, it was believed that Ra, the sun god,
Mhm.
created the honeybee from his tears. The
Oh.
bee was then seen as the messenger of the gods, falling from Ra's face down to earth, where she could deliver the messages from heaven.
Oh, okay.
The ancient Celts also saw honeybees as messengers between worlds. They considered honeybees bringers of wisdom and revered them for their role in the metaphysical.
Well, I can understand about the
Ooh.
wisdom, and we'll get to that a little bit later on. The way that they groom themselves and keep their hives organized and clean, it's quite remarkable.
Well, now in Roman mythology, the bee asked, there's this mythology that the bee asked the gods for a stinger to help protect her honey from the humans.
Okay.
And Jupiter, the god of the Roman god, or the king of the Roman gods, rather,
Uh-huh.
granted that request. His wife, however,
Yeah.
Juno, didn't. She insisted on payment for that gift.
Hmm.
And so along with the gift of the stinger came the condition that if it's used, then the bee will die. And it's
Oh.
true. If a bee stings you, its barbed stinger gets hooked in your skin
Hmm.
and is left behind along with part of the bee's abdomen and internal organs.
Ooh, I
So,
didn't know that.
yeah, nature is lovely. Yeah, the bee will go off and die. It only stings once.
So it sacrifices itself for the rest of the tribe.
That's
hence,
right.
Hence
That's-
why they swarm.
Right, right.
And then there's a lot of folklore also surrounding honey. In ancient Egypt, the god Ra was the creator of everything, said that, honey was the tears. And in I'm sure that you would remember this, in season 3, episode 1, Strange Medicine,
Uh-huh.
our episode called Strange Medicine, we talked about how in 16th century China, there was a medicinal remedy called mellified man.
Okay.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Which involved turning a person into what was basically a human mummified candy bar. The willing participant would turn to eating nothing at all but honey until he eventually passed away, at which time his body would be immersed in honey for a number of years. And then after that, mellified man was then ingested to help alleviate ailments such as broken bones and just about anything else.
Well,
Wow. So,
Yeah.
so he's a honeypot.
Yeah, there you go. And honey,
honey.
for some reason, has been linked to a number of death or funerary traditions.
Okay.
From an interesting blog called Nourishing Death, .wordpress.com, Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, Hindus, Chinese, and many others placed pots of honey next to their corpses, and on the anniversary of one's passing, honey was also poured over their graves. Egyptians also anointed the lips of their deceased priests with honey.
It seemed like that would attract ants.
You would think. The blog post goes on to say, quote, people have used honey, the substance with a seemingly eternal shelf life, to embalm corpses, as in Burma during the rainy season, to temporarily preserve the corpse until it can be cremated.
Oh, okay.
They have to wait until it's drier. And then if the deceased is a monk, once the corpse is removed and prepared for cremation, the honey is extracted from the body first. It is then jarred and sold for exorbitant amounts of money.
So wait a minute. You mean they use the honey in parts of the preservation, and then they pull the honey out and sell it?
Yeah.
Put it in a jar and sell it?
Sell it as medicine.
Yeah, note to
as
self,
medicine.
avoid honey from Burma. But okay.
Yeah. You need to ask where your honey comes
Myanmar,
from.
as it's called these days, I think, yeah.
And later on, I'll talk about another death custom involving bees that's currently still in practice.
Okay.
It's not as gross, though.
All right, let's get down to some cool bee facts. These come to us from World Wildlife Foundation's website, wwf.org, and also from a company called Big Island Bees of Hawaii, whose website is bigislandbees.com. They sell honey. So a single bee, one little bee, weighs 0.00025 pounds. I think that would be 25 100,000ths of a pound. In fact, it takes 4,000 bees together to weigh 1 pound. A hive that contains 50,000 bees weighs about 12 pounds. So it's a lot of bees. It's a very small weight for a big job that they do. A single bee can produce 1 tablespoon of honey in its lifetime. It takes 700 bees flying over 32,000 miles to gather 6 pounds of nectar from about 1,200,000 flowers in order to make 1 10-ounce jar of honey. That's a lot of work to go into one little jar of honey.
Yeah.
Bees can fly up to 12 miles per hour. In fact, on rare occasions have been clocked up to 15 miles per hour. On every foraging trip, a bee will visit 50 to 100 flowers to collect nectar. The hexagonal shape of the honeycomb is the most efficient shape in nature. The pattern allows the cells to be packed full of wax and honey with no empty space in between. Though the wax is thin and delicate, the structure of the hexagonal shells can hold tremendous amounts of weight in honey. This is kind of interesting, too. Bees heat and cool their own hive to keep it between 93 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit year-round.
Wow.
Bees are cold-blooded and must keep their hive at a constant temperature. In cold weather, bees keep the hive warm by swarming together to generate body heat and by sealing cracks in the hive with wax. In warm weather, the bees collect water and line up in a circle around the hive entrance. Using their wings, the bees fan the water so that it evaporates into the air. Then, as they fan the cool air, it circulates around the hive as a sort of a central air conditioning, or sort of like those swamp coolers that people use in dry regions in their homes where they have kind of a water-cooled fan. Mm-hmm. A queen bee will lay 800,000 eggs in her lifetime. That's a lot of eggs. The queen's life is dedicated to reproduction, and she only leaves the hive once in her life in order to mate. Bees are remarkably tidy and meticulous. We touched on this a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. They groom each other, and they keep their hive incredibly clean. Bees have been known to raid other hives and even swipe some honey. You believe they could be territorial like that. This can happen if a beekeeper happens to leave a hive open, or even in the wild if times are lean. For this reason, bees post guard bees around the perimeter of their hive in order to ward off any intruders. If an intruder is detected, there is a fight, and the guard bees will engage them in a battle, and one of them will die. It'll be a battle to the death. However, if the intruder does make it into the hive, she will gain the scent of the others and learn her way around, and then be able to come and go as she pleases.
Oh?
Ooh.
Yeah. Honey and pollen are the building blocks of a bee's diet. Bees eat honey because it provides them with energy-laden carbohydrates, while pollen's protein provides bees with essential amino acids. But the queen's diet is richer in honey, which gives her fertility. The queen's staple food is a special honey and pollen mixture called royal jelly. I don't think they sell it in jars, but that's what the scientists have come up with the name of the special mixture that's just for the queen. Royal jelly contains more pollen and honey than larval jelly, the food eaten by the worker and drone bees. The phrase, quote, "you are what you eat," is especially fitting here since the queen would be infertile and indistinguishable from the smaller worker bees if it weren't for the added carbohydrates in the royal jelly. If the queen bee dies in a honeybee hive, the workers can create a new queen bee. They do this by selecting a young larva and by feeding it royal jelly. The larva will develop into a fertile queen. So the hive continues even if the queen dies.
Right.
The United Kingdom, here's another fun fact. The UK has a series of bee highways, which are strips of natural growing flowers and bushes that connect wildlife areas across the entire country. This allows the bees to travel all over Great Britain with a ready source of flowers wherever they are. And honeybees have some pretty slick moves on the hive dance floor. Researchers call this the waggle dance.
Yeah, I was saying that.
Okay, it's not actually a dance, but it is a way that the bees communicate with other bees in the hive to tell them where to find the best flowers. It took researchers at Sussex University 2 years to decode the waggle dance. I think there's a Far Side cartoon depicting that research.
I'm pretty sure there is.
Wait, when he goes like this, it means the flower's over there.
They shake their booties. They really do.
They're beady.
Well, filed under weird news, I found an article in Futurism.com about some French beekeepers that received quite a surprise when they collected their honey in September of 2012. You see, honey is usually golden color with the shade depending on the flowers the bees got their nectar from. Mm-hmm. But the honey the French beekeepers were collecting was a surprising blue color.
I wonder if these are the same ones that went on strike and claimed Einstein was the...
Yeah, you mean the French beekeepers.
French beekeepers, yeah, not the boot. Yeah, anyway.
Well, the beekeepers were confused and also alarmed since this new honey didn't meet regulations and could not be sold.
Who wants to buy blue honey?
It was a mystery and needed to be figured out, and the situation rectified. Well, it took some investigative work, but it was eventually discovered the source of the problem was at a nearby biogas plant. Oh. Now, a biogas plant is an operation that creates biogas, a renewable fuel created by breaking down organic matter like food or animal waste, which then can be turned into fuel or electricity. And it's incredibly stinky. I work for a man that has a biogas company in another state, thankfully, and it is incredibly stinky. But this particular biogas plant was using waste from a candy company, specifically waste from the M&M candy production.
Wow.
The bees had found the M&Ms and snacked on those and instead of getting nectar from flowers.
Oh, yeah.
The junk food honey wasn't considered real honey.
Shortcut bees.
That's right. Well, they just, you find a snack, you're just going to hang out there.
If it was going to be anything to distract me, it would be M&Ms.
You're right. Hey.
No. Don't say it. Anyway,
I had some earlier today.
This wasn't considered real honey since it wasn't produced from flower nectar. The technicolored quasi-honey had to be thrown out. The good news is that as soon as the problem was brought to the attention of the biogas company, they took measures to cover up the candy waste to prevent the bees from binging, and the French honey finally turned back into its natural golden color.
I don't know. I think I would buy some M&M honey.
Well, yes.
M&M honey. I thought that they could at least sell it as like a novelty or something like that. But it's it's heavily regulated. It's food. It's
right.
Anyway.
Bunch of spoil sports in the regulation department. Well, okay.
Fine, we won't get blue honey.
All right, well, now, according to the Smithsonian Institute website, si.edu, in 1956, some African honeybees were brought to Brazil with the idea of crossbreeding them with local bees in order to increase the honey production. What could go wrong?
Like a great idea.
Yeah. The following year, several of the bees escaped from their experimental apiary.
No.
These escapees began mating with the local bee populations, hanging out at the malls and,
along the bee highways.
Right, yeah, wearing leather jackets and causing problems, They created offspring that were and are unusually aggressive. They became known as the killer bees. Now, we mentioned this in our Season 2, Episode 14, about weird monuments, as there was a town down in South Texas that has a giant statue of a killer bee. Swarms of these bees began spreading north and had reached the southern border of the United States by 1993. The killer bees are dangerous because they attack intruders in numbers much greater than ordinary bees. Since 1957, they have killed more than 1,000 people, with victims receiving 10 times the number of stings as ordinary honeybees. They also react to disturbances 10 times faster and have been known to chase a person for a quarter of a mile. Now, that's pretty persistent.
That is very persistent.
Yeah, how fast is your quarter mile?
I'm not sure I could run a quarter mile.
I've heard of people running from them and jumping into water, jumping into a lake and kind of going underground, under the water. But the bees stay right there and wait for you to come back up.
You've got to breathe. I know it.
I think I saw that on a Tom and Jerry cartoon way back in the day. You know, they kind of hovered around until they came back up.
I know you're coming up. I know you're coming up.
In addition to their danger to human and domestic animals, killer bees can decimate local bee populations. When aggressive bees invade local honeybee colonies, the results can lead to erratic pollination, disorder in the hive, excessive hive abandonment, and loss of survivability in cold weather. We got trouble right here in River City with a capital B.
Oh,
it's thick today.
Yeah. Now, there are two...
Like honey.
Yeah.
There are two methods of attempting to contain the killer bee population that are showing some promise. The first is called drone flooding, which means that large numbers of common honeybees are introduced into areas where commercially grown queens mate. This cuts down on the likelihood of killer bees mating with the queen, just by sheer numbers. The other strategy is requeening frequently, where the beekeeper frequently replaces the queens of colonies, thus assuring that the queens are common honeybees and that mating has also occurred with common drones. So there is some good news to report on the honeybee killer bee front.
That's an interesting word, requeening.
Requeening.
I'm busy requeening.
Well, it also they can take the queen, put her in another hive, start another hive, and just keep on trucking.
That's right. Well, bee stings, though, aren't all bad. The venom from bee stings has been used for centuries to alleviate symptoms of ailments such as joint pain, arthritis, gout, shingles, hay fever, and burns.
Wow.
Today, there's something called bee venom therapy, which that sounds so scary, right? It's being used to help treat victims of MS, or multiple sclerosis, a long-lasting or chronic disease of the central nervous system. According to an article at health.howstuffworks.com, bee venom therapy, or BVT, uses bee venom to relieve symptoms of MS such as pain, loss of coordination, and muscle weakness. The idea is that the compounds found within bee venom work to reduce inflammation and pain, and somehow works within the immune system of the body to induce it to release natural healing compounds in its own defense.
Right.
The therapy is not for the weak-hearted. So while reading about it, I formed the wrong assumption, that somehow the bee venom is harvested and put into syringes. So I've seen where they've harvested snake venom and they've got I didn't know. Are they holding a little bee? Nope, that's not what they do.
Oh, okay.
According to beeculture.com, treatment typically consists of a patient receiving actual bee stings.
Oh.
How do they control where this... Well,
3 times a week, about every other day. Stings are applied over the body on a rotating basis. So I think the bees are in a jar, and they're put to the skin where they want the sting to happen. So they do control where the person is stung. So they're applied on a rotating basis over the body. So you're not constantly stung in the same places over and over. Again, according to beeculture.com, bee venom therapy is available almost anywhere, and as long as the patient is not hyperallergic, the treatment is safe without long-term adverse effects, even with long-term application of the therapeutic doses. While this seems like drastic measures, for real drastic measures,
right,
the symptoms of MS can be debilitating, and many patients don't get to the point where they welcome almost any form of...
I can certainly understand that.
If it can help in relief, that's... Wow.
You're looking for anything that'll help.
Well, there have been no major studies on the actual effects of BVT that it has on MS patients. Thousands of MS sufferers have turned to using the therapy that is currently considered to fall under the category of alternative medicine. And this has prompted Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. to begin a comprehensive study in bee venom therapy. I'd like to think that means that in the future we'll be able to harvest the bee venom in a way to not have to kill off the bees, and so that the treatment may be given in pill form or even injection rather than in a bee sting.
Yeah, what's the substance that's in a bee's venom? That could be helpful. Could be isolated.
I don't know. Well, and I wonder if it's kind of like I interviewed a doctor one time to write an article about it, and he was using stem cell therapy. And it's kind of where they take the stem cells and they put it in a place in your body that you need help, like your back or whatever. And it causes the immune system to target that part. And I wonder if that's what the bee stings do.
Possibly.
It's introducing some kind of venom that's overall, if you're not allergic to it, it's pretty harmless.
Right. And the body will go attack that area or
go help. Work on that area. And so it just kind of boosts the immune system. Anyway, I'm not sure exactly how it works. I'm not a scientist.
But I play one on the radio. No,
that's right.
And now for something completely off topic and off kilter. Brace yourself for the oddity du jour.
Well, all right, for our oddity du jour today, we have found an article from people.com about an inspiring woman named Diane Gordon. Diane is a 65-year-old grandmother of 2. She lives in White Lake, Michigan, which is near Detroit. A year ago, her car gave up the ghost for the last time, and thus Diane has had to walk to and from work 3 miles each day for 5 days a week. It can get pretty cold in Michigan.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the weather can be pretty rough, but Diane had no choice but to get out in the elements and walk. It took her close to an hour each direction. On January 21st of 2023, as she was walking home, she stopped into a gas station to grab a snack. In the parking area, she noticed something on the ground that looked strange. It was a plastic bag with something green inside. Picking it up, she noticed that the green was cash. Lots of it. In fact, $14,780 in cash.
Oh, wow.
Now imagine yourself in Diane's place. No car, walking to work in the elements each day, struggling to make ends meet. You might have thought, woohoo, my prayers have been answered. But that's not what Diane thought.
What dealer did I just stumble upon?
Quote, "This doesn't belong to me. I need to call the police officer," she remembered thinking to herself after finding the $14,780 in cash. And that's what she did. When officers responded, they were able to find the proper owner of the missing cash. Along with the money, there were wedding cards addressed to a couple who had just gotten married earlier that day.
Oh, wow.
Evidently, they stopped at the gas station and the money dropped out of the car. And
or maybe
didn't notice it.
Yeah, or maybe they put it on top of the car and didn't.
Get it down.
They might have had their mind on other things. Who knows? Police tracked down the couple and returned their cash to them, and obviously they were overjoyed. But then the police turned their attention back to Diane. The wife of one of the police officers who responded to Diane's call set up a GoFundMe account to try to collect enough money to buy her a car. After local media picked up the story, lots of people donated, and within a couple of weeks, over $66,000 had been collected.
Wow.
On February 3rd, police officers surprised Diane with a brand new Jeep Compass. Quote, "I'm floored. I'm having trouble taking it all in," Diane exclaimed as she saw her new car. "It has a steering wheel warmer and a backup camera and lots of other things I've never had before." Diane is still quite humble about what she did. Quote, "All I did was not keep something that didn't belong to me. I didn't do anything special." White Lake Police Chief Dan Keller disagrees. Quote, "This doesn't happen very often that someone finds a large sum of money and turns it in. We need a lot more Dianes around."
Amen.
Yes, we do.
Agree with that. Great job. Thank you, Diane.
And we're back.
Yay.
Dun, dun, dun.
Well, now, an article on BBC.com details a study at St. Mary's University in London where researchers hid a sugary treat inside closed containers and then trained a controlled set of bees to open the containers. Meanwhile, another group of bees was watching from a nearby glass container. When given their opportunity to open the container, 98% of the observer bees got it correct on the first try. They had learned simply by watching other bees, and this demonstration proved that bees learn behavior socially. They learn by watching each other.
Right. It's been shown that bees have a real knack for learning new things. And no doubt you've heard of dogs used to sniff out drugs or explosives, but did you know that the sense of smell is very distinct in bees as well?
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
According to HowStuffWorks.com, scientists from the Defense Advanced Research Laboratory, who have been working with honeybees since 1999, say that bees can actually challenge dogs when it comes to its sense of smell. After all, they're able to sniff out molecular hints of pollen in the air.
Okay.
But dogs have been domesticated for several hundred years and are easily trained. How in the world do you go about training a bee? Well,
you get stung a lot.
Yeah. Very tiny leash.
Yeah, you do it the same way though that you would a dog. Training is accomplished by linking a reward with a particular stimulus. Right. So when bees do what you want it to do, you reward it with sugar water. Yeah. So that's a pretty cheap way of
bring back those M&Ms. Yeah.
It apparently doesn't take that long either for the bees to get it. Scientists at Los Alamos National Laboratory developed the Stealthy Insect Sensor Project, where they would keep bees in small tubes. And then when the smell of the chemicals used to make explosives was introduced, the bees, expecting to receive sugar water, would extend its proboscis, which is its tongue, and start waving it in the air for nectar. The researchers used monitoring equipment to capture the behavior and knew that it signaled the presence of an explosive. This setup works really nicely in situations involving airports, subways, and roadside checkpoints, as the bees can detect the target chemicals in the air in concentrations as low as a few parts per trillion.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that crazy?
That
Interesting.
Crazy.
So they were thinking then of what, having bees at busy places where they're suspected of.
Well, and it's not like just a swarm of bees going around on your luggage, you know.
Right.
It's a bunch of little threads.
They're contained. They're contained, and then there's monitoring equipment on that container.
Right.
Are
they sticking their tongues out?
Yeah, to see if they're sticking their tongues out.
So they're introducing the air from inside the place, too, to see if they can see what's going on.
And the researchers at Los Alamos are also training the bees to sniff out drugs like methamphetamine and cocaine. So can you imagine in schools having random drug tests on these bees? Anyway, then bringing bees instead of dogs.
I can see a new movie, Cocaine Bee.
That's great.
It was a quick flick.
Yes.
One stung and it's over.
Right.
Anyway, I got my information at
killer bees on cocaine. Man,
HowStuffWorks.com. I am quite sure there's been studies on that. I'm sure of it. Bees have also been useful in Africa to help ease the tension between neighbors. From one of my favorite poets, Robert Frost, comes the line, "Good fences makes good neighbors," in the poem Mending Wall. In parts of Africa where the expansion of farmland has encroached on elephant territory, things have gotten tense as the elephants have fought back by destroying property and crops. Fences used to keep out other wildlife, that just doesn't work on elephants who will just trample through it.
Yeah.
Hey, what you got?
Thorns don't bother them.
Yeah, that's cute. Let's just move right on through. Stomp. Elephants do have a healthy fear of bees, and you wouldn't think so because of their thick skin, but bees can get to their eyes and inside their trunks.
Snouts,
which is very sensitive. Yeah. So elephants are afraid of bees, and in 2010, a researcher named Lucy King determined that East African elephants have a unique sound that they make when they come across an area infested with bees. Huh. So they, in effect, are communicating to the rest of the herd the location of the dangerous bees.
Don't stay here.
Farmers have taken to putting beehives all along the perimeters of their properties and attaching them to the fences. So when elephants encounter the fence and shake it, the bees are disturbed and attack. The elephant then goes and tells all the others to stay away from that location. And it's been a good solution with the added bonus of honey.
Yeah, that's good.
Right.
The farmers get honey too. And I got my information from an article on nowiknow.com.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I thought you were going to say that the farmers had learned how to make the sound that the elephants make.
Right, I was going there too.
Ventriloquist farmers.
That wouldn't be a bad idea either. But I'm pretty sure elephants are intelligent enough to eventually realize it's a recording. It's the same thing.
That's the same elephant 7 times.
Yeah.
That's right.
7 different places.
Wait a minute. I remember that. Get it? Elephants remember things. Well, let's move on now. We were talking about killer bees a little bit earlier. And, our older listeners may remember the Killer Bee sketch in the first season of Saturday Night Live. Most of the comedy of the sketch derived from the giant springy eyeballs that the cast members wore on their heads. But that leads us into the realm of bees in popular culture. There's a lot of bees in popular culture you might not have been aware of. So let's dive into it. From Utah State University's website, usu.edu, it's kind of an interesting website, usu.edu, Utah State University. Okay. We find an interesting article that details the role bees have played in American popular culture. Throughout our history, the bee has been a symbol of industry and community.
Cheerios.
Bees were, Cheerios.
And Cheerios, too.
The honeybee. Bees were brought to North America by the Virginia Company in 1621 and were vital in sustaining the lives of early colonists, which makes me wonder if bees were not native to North America before they were brought over by the earlier settlers. I do know that in the Pacific Northwest, bees were not native there until American settlers brought them out there. Soon after independence was gained in 1776, the Continental Congress in Philadelphia put the image of a beehive on the $45 bill as a symbol of stability. I didn't realize we ever had a $45
bill. Is interesting.
Yes.
We need an episode on money.
Right. Currency. Odd currency. The beehive was adopted as a symbol of the Mormon community, which refers to it as a Deseret. In fact, before Utah was created, the Mormons had envisioned a territory of their own that was going to be called Deseret. Beehives can be seen as ornamental decorations on the Mormon temple itself in Salt Lake City, including on the massive doorknobs. There are huge beehives that are decorating the doorknobs. And the nickname of Utah is, in fact, the Beehive State, and the symbol of the beehive can be seen on the state's highway system's signs. Throughout the years, bee idioms have been common in American communication. A particularly industrious person is said to be busy as a bee. Mm-hmm. A group of such persons has been detailed as a hive of activity. In fact, even the New York Times uses this expression. The article noted in a 2017 article entitled Building a Buzzy Hive of Invention and Collaboration to describe Brown University as they turned an old building into a nursing school. So that idiom is still with us in modern times. Of course, bees are small creatures, and they have very tiny knees. In the 1800s, the expression bee's knees referenced something exceedingly small. However, by the 1920s, the Roaring Twenties generation had reappropriated that term bee's knees, along with cat's pajamas, to mean something highly complimentary. A young woman might explain, quote, "That cute guy is the bee's knees."
Oh my gosh.
And this one's coming back in a couple of years.
The queen bee is no longer just about the insect world, but is now used to describe a woman who is in charge of a group. For example, in the movie Mean Girls, Regina George is called the queen bee of her clique, or clique, however you want to say it, of girls who rule the school. You've seen this movie?
Yes, I have.
Well, you guys got daughters that are
it's
the age,
funny.
So. I did not. I'm not checking that box.
Even the popular singer Beyonce refers to herself as the queen bee, and her thousands of fans as her beehive, although she spells them with B-E-Y instead of B-E-E, but still pronounces it as queen bee. By the way, Beyonce claims that she actually has 2 beehives on her property, stating that 2 of her children have difficult allergies, and the bee's honey is healthy for them.
I've heard that. It's an anecdotal kind of way of dealing with allergies, and some people say it works, and some people say it doesn't. But.
Right. Now, I love this one. In the 1930s, the United States Navy saw a need to develop their own version of the Army Corps of Engineers. The Navy construction battalions were developed to provide innovative resources for the construction of landing strips, naval docks, and other projects that might arise. By the time World War II began, the men in the construction battalions modified the initials CB from construction battalions to become the Seabees, the SEABEES. They were involved in the reconstruction of Pearl Harbor, and they gained tremendous fame for their creative and innovative construction techniques throughout the Pacific War, often performing their task while under fire. And they have the coolest logo, and we need to put this logo on our social media. It shows a bee wearing a sailor's hat in a dive bombing position, holding a machine gun, a wrench, and a hammer.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Underneath the word Seabees is their motto, can do. And today, the Seabees still have some 7,000 active personnel. They're still an active part of the United States Navy today. And finally, we can't forget about the birds and the bees, a euphemism used to talk about sex. In 1965, an artist named Jewel Akins released a song with lyrics that went, "Let me tell you about the birds and the bees and the flowers and the trees and the moon up above and a thing called love." Okay, my friends and I, we all loved it, even though we were only 8 at the time and we had no idea what the song was about. Another song at that same time was "My Baby Does the Hanky Panky." We loved that song too, with no idea what it was about. Anyway, that song went all the way to number 3 on Billboard's Top 100 chart, which was pretty impressive in the era of the Beatles. But this isn't the only musical reference to the birds and the bees. In 1928, Cole Porter wrote a song called "Let's Do It, Let's Fall in Love" for a Broadway musical. The opening line to the song goes, "Birds do it, bees do it, even educated fleas do it. Let's do it, let's fall in love." So there you go, some bees in popular culture.
Well, to expand on that just a bit, did you know that Saint Valentine is also the patron saint of bees?
No, I did not know that.
It's not that surprising when you think about it. Bees are essential to pollination, so the procreation of flowers, and honey was long thought of as an aphrodisiac.
Oh, okay.
So for a long time, it was a tradition to give newlyweds a bottle of mead, an alcohol made from honey,
right?
Which was supposed to last them a month, and this was the origin of the term honeymoon.
Oh, okay.
And then from buzzaboutthebees.net, we find that Cupid, the Roman god of love, is also associated with honey.
Okay.
There's a story that Cupid was getting honey from a hive when he was stung by a bee. And when he complained about how something so small could cause so much pain, his mother, Venus, reminded him that he is also small, and he and his arrows deliver the sting of love.
Oh, yeah.
And in some Cupid stories, he actually dips his arrows in honey before aiming them at an unsuspecting human heart. And I talked earlier about folklore surrounding bees and honey and death rituals and all of that kind of stuff. But one of the oldest pieces of folklore, and my favorite, is the superstition that if you keep bees, then you have an obligation to tell the hive about any major event happening, such as a birth, death, a marriage, or a move.
You got to tell the hive.
It's called the telling of the bees.
Tell the bees, okay.
And in researching this tradition, I found that many people in the U.S. thought it was an old tradition tracing back to Appalachia, which is the resilient people that have populated the area in and around the Appalachian Mountains in the eastern United States, where some of my family comes from. But those are your people. That's my people. But the truth is, the tradition of telling of the bees goes back much farther than those settlers and is seen in many cultures across the globe. According to an article by Stephanie Hogan for CBC.ca, the recent death of Queen Elizabeth was cause for the royal beekeeper, John Chappell, to carry out the tradition of informing the bees of the sad news.
Oh, goodness, okay.
Mr. Chappell solemnly placed black ribbons on each of the royal hives. He then approached each hive separately and gently knocked on it to get the bees' attention before telling them in hushed tones that the queen has died and urging them to be good to their new master, King Charles III.
Interesting.
Mr. Chappell told the Daily Mail, "I'm at the hives now," and it is, meaning he was chosen as the royal beekeeper. "I'm at the hives now, and it is traditional when someone dies that you go to the hives and say a little prayer and put a black ribbon on the hive. You knock on each hive and say, the mistress is dead, but you don't go. Or don't you go. Your master will be a good master to you. So encouraging the bees to stay through
around,
the change.
Bees, don't run off.
Yeah. It's superstition that if the bees are not told of major news, then there would be an upset in the honey production, or the bees may even die off or leave the hive altogether. Telling the bees is a traditional custom of many European countries in which bees would be told of important events in their keepers' lives, as the bees were considered part of the household rather than just livestock.
Okay.
Besides the UK and the United States, the custom of telling the bees has roots in Ireland, Wales, Germany, Netherlands, France, Switzerland, and Bohemia.
Wow.
And again, I got my information from cbc.ca, hobbyfarms.com, and dailymail.co.uk.
Okay. Well, according to a study by Ohio State University, bee populations in the United States are declining rapidly. On average, beekeepers are reporting loss rates averaging around 30% each year. Now, just 20 years ago, the loss rate was only between 10 and 15%. Increased use of pesticides and herbicides, as well as increased urbanization and air pollution, are the most noted causes of the decline. While the problems are complex, there is much that humans can do to help reverse this trend. The Ohio State University article detailed 4 things that people can do to support their local bees. Now, I'll tell you that once I showed this article to my wife, we went right out and did one of these things.
All right.
Because she was motivated. Number 1, provide a honeybee-friendly habitat in your yard or your outdoor space. Providing an abundance of bee-attractive blooms concentrated in a small location like a portion of your yard can help, said Sharon Trester, a researcher with Ohio State's Department of Horticulture and Crop Science. Quote, this will create dense forage that lets honeybees build up food reserves for rainy weather and winter survival. Some specific blooms that bees love are sunflowers, coneflowers, geraniums, poppies, and black-eyed Susans. We went out and bought some sunflower seeds and planted them in the backyard.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Good.
Number 2 is eat bee-friendly foods. Organic foods are generally grown without the use of pesticides. They are healthier for the bees, and many believe they are healthier for people, too. I've noticed a lot more and more organic options being available now, even in mainstream stores like, the Kroger and Walmart. They have large numbers. I'll tell you, I was always kind of on the fence about organic foods. It seemed like something that people wanted us to believe and maybe had an agenda. But once we needed bananas and the regular bananas were also green, it would be weeks before they were done. So I bought organic bananas. Okay, they tasted better.
Oh, really?
They
really?
did. Yeah, they really did.
They're usually more expensive, but it's because they lose so much more of the crop.
Right.
Because they don't use the
My son-in-law
pesticides.
is a bodybuilder, and he actually participates in competitions, and he's very in touch with what he eats, and he reports that he can tell a difference in organic foods being better for him. So
interesting.
Anyway, number 3, select carefully when choosing pesticides and herbicides for your own yard. Read labels to make sure that they are safe for bees. Consider not killing flowery weeds like dandelions, which provide good nourishment for bees.
Unless you're going to replace them with sunflowers.
Right. Number 4, leave the bees alone. Generally, bees are not aggressive. They won't sting unless they are provoked. Let them go about their beesness.
Oh my God.
And don't kill them. Teaching your children about the importance of bees will help them to respect them. Along these lines, we had an interesting experience on our recent trip to Greece. On our last day there, my wife and I, along with my sister and brother-in-law, stopped into a beautiful little restaurant in a small village. The restaurant sat on a slope, and it had open sides offering a nice view of the area. So it was just open, completely open. Beautiful flowering plants were hanging in the open areas. As it was mid-afternoon, we were the only ones in the restaurant. It was owned and operated by a woman who had her 2 children helping her. We ordered a meat sampler plate large enough for the 4 of us to pick and choose whatever we liked. When our delicious smelling food arrived, so did the bees. Lots of them. And I must say they weren't aggressive, but it was a little bit disturbing trying to eat our lunch in a literal cloud of bees. Our host saw our hesitance, and so she pulled up an extra chair by our table. Quote, "Put a little food in the chair for the bees," she said. Once we did this, the bees left us alone and mostly hovered around the chair, each taking their turn at tasting the meats and vegetable pieces that we placed there for them. It was remarkable, really, the way that they left us alone. So that was kind of a lesson that we learned there about coexisting with the bees.
And now it's time, boys and girls, for the Trivia Challenge.
All right, the Trivia Challenge for today. You know how this works. Like and follow our Facebook page at Remnant Stew Podcast. Like and share this episode post. Put your answer to the Trivia Challenge question in the comments of that post. The first individual to do all that will be the winner. Yay, winners! Woohoo! And will be mentioned in an upcoming episode of Remnant Stew. Our Trivia Challenge is also open to school kids. If you're a teacher and your class listens to Remnant Stew, we challenge them to answer the Trivia Challenge. Send us the answer through email at staycurious@remnantstew.com. If your class is the first to answer, we will send a nice care package to the whole class. What kind of a deal is that? Yeah. All right, so what is our question today, Leah?
Well, the word alvearium means hive in Latin. This word was used to fight off an enemy in what popular book series?
Ooh. That's cool. I'll bet some people will know that. The kids will know that one.
Yeah, they might hit that one pretty quick. Hey, thanks for spending some time with us. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Remnant Stew Podcast. You can also send us an email to say hi or to suggest a topic for a future episode at staycurious@remnantstew.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Remnant Stew is a part of Rook and Raven Ventures and is created by me, Leah Lamp. Dr. Stephen Meeker and I research, write, and host each episode along with commentary by our audio producer, Philip Sinquefield. Theme music is by Kevin MacLeod with voiceover by Morgan Hughes, and special thanks goes out to Brandy Nichols, Judy, Meeker, and Harbin Gould.
Well, now, before you go, please hit the follow button so you won't miss an episode. Head on over to Apple Music and leave us a review. Share Remnant Stew with your friends, your family, and Beyonce if you happen to run into her. Until next time, remember to choose to be kind and always stay curious.